Hello. If you find that you sometimes put so much effort into caring for other people that you never get around to looking after yourself, then you're in the right place. I'm Andrew Kane, a therapist and coach that's particularly interested in that kind of thing. And I'm with Valerie Hartwich, who's a psychosomatic therapist who uses massage, speech, and yoga to help people resolve these and other kinds of issues. Around this video, you'll see others we've made on shadows and boundaries and self-care. But in this episode, we're going to be talking about some of the unhelpful beliefs that can sometimes get you stuck and some ways that you can unpack those and get around it. And they're often things that we pick up from childhood, messages that we got that we've taken on board and that we've just never really questioned. Just like perhaps in the past, people never questioned whether the world was round or flat. It just felt like it was obviously flat. So we're just going to open up some of those questions now so you can have a little think about it. I know certainly for me, it has a little personal resonance. When I was growing up, I went to a Christian school. My family weren't Christian particularly, but my school was, and I remember things that I picked up from Bible readings, for example, like turn the other cheek. It was like something that popped into my head. Like if there's a conflict, the good thing to do is to turn the other cheek. Or other things around that, like self-sacrifice is like a good thing. And yeah, it was certainly something that took me a while to unpack and notice and get around and get over. So anyway, so this episode is to help talk around some of those issues. So the first one that I thought we could talk about, Valerie, is this kind of idea about selfishness. It's a really common belief, isn't it? That selfishness is a bad thing, is a kind of a hidden belief that a lot of people carry, and that stops them from looking after themselves in relationship. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Valerie.
So hi everybody, thank you for introducing us first and foremost. Okay, so yeah, I think selfishness is a very important thing to look at, and one's attitude and one's beliefs, including one's definition of selfishness, is a very important thing to be honest about if you are going to be in a caring position. So whether you're a parent, whether you're caring for somebody who is unwell in one capacity or another, or whether you're doing this professionally. Because the truth of the matter is, when you're entering these kinds of relationship, it's very much about you being in that position of the care and the other person being in the position of receiving the care. So it can very well fit the kind of stereotype of Mother Teresa and kind of, you know, sacrificing yourself or being completely altruistic. And often it doesn't get questioned more than that. Now, the trouble is, if you really have a belief that selfishness, so looking after yourself, is a bad thing, you are very likely to basically go above and beyond your abilities and your needs and your limits, basically, in that caring relationship. So I think it's very important to look at what selfishness is. And first and foremost, I would maybe put a few words out there. There's selflessness, there's selfishness, and then there's kind of the shades of egotistical variations that can exist. So you have egomaniacs, you have people who are egotic, etc. And I think when we say selfishness, we kind of don't really know what we mean. It's a very broad term, don't you think?
Yeah, and it's got very negative connotations. Certainly, I think most people hear selfish and feel that's a really bad thing, possibly rightly, and think that therefore selflessness must be a good thing because it's the opposite of that. Or putting everyone else first must be a good thing because it's the opposite of that. And that's a really unhelpful dichotomy. Is that the word? It's an unhelpful opposition.
Yeah, it is very unhelpful because in a caring relationship, there are two people, right? There is you, the self, and then there's the other person. If you are really truly being completely selfless, then it's no longer a relationship. Then it's only about the person who needs the care, and that becomes what defines everything in that relationship. A, and B, it's no longer a relationship if you completely forget about yourself. So I think selfishness is often exaggerated in its definition to mean that you are self-centered, to mean that your motivations are only about what is good for you or what you want, etc. Whereas I think a certain degree of selfishness is taking into account yourself, your needs, your makeup, so the stuff that makes you who you are, and that includes the education that you've had and the concepts that you have in your head. Because the more that you have a level of awareness of who that self who is entering in a relationship is, the better you can be in that relationship, the better you can navigate the moments where the needs don't necessarily match, the moments where you can basically potentially have friction with the other person. So a level of selfishness is actually a very adult thing, very responsible thing to bring to any kind of relationship.
Yeah, it's, for me, it's like looking for a win-win kind of relationship rather than only a lose-win in terms of the therapist or the yoga teacher or the partner thinking that the good thing, if it's bad to always win, then the good thing must be to always lose, and that's neither of those is true. The helpful thing is a win-win where everybody's winning and everybody's happy.
Yes. One thing though that I would probably say is, what in a win-win, in the way that we just generally understand win-win nowadays, as we want the win to be immediate, we want both parties to win immediately, simultaneously, which is a fairly unrealistic expectation. And actually, whether you enter a relationship with that kind of mindset, or whether you enter a relationship in the mindset of I am going to completely sacrifice myself to that person's need, can lead to things such as anger, conflict, and can be very challenging. And that can bring a whole new different difficulty to the relationship, because often the romanticized idea is that if you are in a caring relationship with somebody, that there is no place for anger, for conflict, or for challenge, that these things are bad, and that these things reflect something about the relationship or you. So I think win-win, absolutely, but it has to be a win-win in like a larger, more longer-term kind of perspective.
Yeah, thank you. That's an amazing. Thank you for bringing that in. And you've very neatly connected us to the other kind of belief that might be fun to talk about, is this idea around like anger, challenge, conflict, that idea that somehow that's always a bad thing. And a lot of people feel uncomfortable around anger. They have beliefs that conflict is bad, and maybe in their families, they were like always the peacemaker, and they're trying to keep everything quiet and balanced all the time, feeling like that's a good thing to do. And I think that's another belief that's worth questioning, because often some degree of conflict can be really healthy. For example, if someone's behaving in a way that's unkind, maybe it's unkind to you or unkind to themselves, to be able to challenge them on that, even if they disagree in the short term, as you were saying, Valerie, this can be a longer win when that helps them actually learn. Like without that conflict, how's anyone ever going to learn or change, or how's a relationship going to develop? How's a student going to get better?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I'm gonna make a confession. I'm making it sound more, bigger than what it
big
is.
build up.
But I think I am fairly stereotypical the average person who enters into like a caring kind of profession, and who often ends up being in like a caring capacity in friendships or whatever relationships I enter into. And I definitely used to have this sense that I needed to make everybody happy. And I like harmony. I genuinely like harmony. But it took me a very long time to basically get over this idea that if there is anger, challenge, or conflict, whether it's in me or around me or towards me, then that something essentially is bad. That I failed at something. There was generally the sense that I failed at something.
It was your job to keep everybody happy.
It was my job to keep everybody
happy. So it's
happy.
your fault.
Yeah, but actually, if I'm really completely honest, not only was it my job to keep everybody happy, and so it made me a really valuable person because I made everybody happy. But it also had to do with the fact that ingrained somewhere in my head was the idea that I wasn't good enough as it was, imperfect, I wasn't good enough. And so I had to make everything so that I would be perfect and everything would be perfect. And I think it's a very difficult thing to take unconsciously into a caring capacity, because it is very likely to make you go above and beyond. It is very likely to exhaust you very fast. And it's very likely to actually create the conflict, the challenge, and the anger, because you're constantly making these implicit contracts with somebody else in your head that the other person has no idea of, but that because you are in this relationship, you have made them sign in your head, but they've had no say, you know. You're doing all these things, and the implicit contract is it will make you better or it will make you happy. And if that doesn't happen, then it creates a lot of frustration that can manifest essentially as a form of anger, conflict, frustration, or challenge.
Yeah, I think thank you for sharing that, Valerie. I think a lot of people, and me too, like often carry around those kind of those beliefs, like I have to keep everybody happy and that kind of thing, which can, until you spot them and question them, can keep you really stuck, like you're saying. I quite like a reframe that I heard around conflict was the difference between hurting and harming. So, for example, creating like discomfort or pain might be unpleasant in the short term, but help someone in the long term. So like if a nurse gives you a vaccination or an injection, it hurts for a little bit, but it helps you in the long term. Equally, on the flip side, it can be harming where actually you're keeping everything nice, but you're actually allowing a behavior to continue that might hurt you and the relationship and the other person in a much bigger way in a longer term.
Yeah.
So
I don't think I have much to say to that.
Yeah.
Pertinent way of putting it, actually. And
well, maybe we should skip on to the next one.
Please go ahead.
It looked like you were just about to say something, no?
Yeah, no, but that's okay.
Yeah. It's sort of what you've touched upon already, this belief that lots of us sometimes carry, that we have to put everyone else's needs above our own. Like we have to keep the peace, we have to make sure that everyone else is happy. And I think in business, it sometimes comes through as like the customer is always right, or in relationships, it sometimes comes through as that love means always putting my partner's needs before my own, or my children's needs before my own. And it can seem good at the time, and can be socially encouraged because people like the immediate effect of you looking after them, but it can be very damaging in the same way in the long term if you don't question it and you're not looking after yourself.
Yes, and I would say let's scratch a little bit beyond the surface of, mottos like the customer is always king or whatever, and Genuinely, the only reason why that motto exists is because the company wants to make money. It wants to sell you something. So even though it looks like it's a completely altruistic motive, it's deeply selfish. And in that sense, selfish and in a potentially harmful way, because it is manipulative.
Yeah, and I think it can sometimes sneak in to particularly people running small businesses who have heard this motto, and then they feel like they have to do everything that their customers, their clients are asking of them. And certainly as a therapist, I found in my business how useful it is to set boundaries when there's someone who's been late twice or they've missed their appointments, to say, well, next time you're going to have to pay in advance. And if you don't come, you don't get your money back, for example. It's been really helpful in my practice. And it's another example of setting a boundary on other people's behavior and letting go of always accommodating what other people are doing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And but again, I'll come back to what I was saying before. I think it's we often say that things are completely altruistic, or that they're done entirely for the other person. But if we're a little bit honest and we peek behind the curtain, one of the reasons why we do so many things for other people is because it does something for us. Either because it helps us to sell a product, or because it helps us feel like we're a good person, or because it guarantees us the love and the appreciation of person XYZ, or God knows what. So I think a really important thing to address, given the topic that we have, is that it's like a lot of things in life. It's not a completely, selfishness or altruism and selfishness are not complete opposites, and they don't exist in a world where there's a vacuum between them. Actually, the line between the two of them is often quite a tenuous line, and sometimes it's hard to actually tell one from the other apart. So I think if one is entering in relationship, and especially if one is entering into a caring relationship, obviously one has to truly assess the state of the person that one is in that relationship with, and what they're capable and not capable of doing, or capable and not capable of receiving. But you equally have to assess your own needs and your own motivations, because if the more you do so, the more you're able to basically do what needs to be done in order to keep that relationship healthy and thriving for everybody.
Yeah. And perhaps just the last thing to note is a belief that keeps a lot of people stuck is the idea that you have to be brilliant at doing all of the above, all the things we've talked about all the time, or else you've completely messed it up. And I call it like personal perfectionism or self-perfectionism, which can keep you really stuck. And perhaps just to add on to what we're saying is that it's really important to allow yourself to mess up sometimes, to not feel like you have to get everything perfect to keep and that's actually part of maintaining a healthy relationship with yourself while you're looking after with others.
Yeah, and the thing is, even if you're not looking after others, it's it's essential to do that. And again, I think I know this tendency of wanting to be perfect very well, and I can only say that in my case, one of the drivers behind wanting to appear perfect or wanting to do everything perfectly is that I don't want to be caught red-handed, not knowing everything, not being able to handle everything, not being fully capable. And the trouble is, by adopting this attitude of like, I know it all, I can do it all, I am Miss Perfect, I'm also shortchanging myself, because I don't give myself the opportunity to challenge myself, to learn new things, and to like highlight the areas that I might need to work on, that I might need to explore. And the other thing is, I also beat myself up every time I fail.
Yeah. And That's, yeah. So just to add on to that, when you catch yourself beating yourself up, do you have a little tip for like thing that you use to catch yourself in the act and bring yourself back to being kind to yourself?
Yes, it sounds ridiculous, but when I do catch myself beating myself up, I try to not beat myself up because I was beating myself up.
Yes, that's the eternal loop.
It's a vicious circle, you know. So how do I not turn my self-awareness and my self-development into one more tool to beat myself up? That's one thing that I do. And then the second thing that I do is like, well, you know, I'm just a human being, and either today is a difficult day for reason X, Y, Z. So I obviously I'm not fully in control of everything. Or if it's a brand new situation, then it's like, oh wow, look at that. Rather than telling myself I've failed, I look at myself and I tell myself, okay, so that's something that we can grow into. It's often a matter of changing my perspective. And as always, centering and grounding is a very useful practice in those moments.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Valerie. If someone wants to follow up with you, where can they find you?
So I have two things. If you want to work with me directly, and you are, well, you could be anyone really, but if you want to work with me, my website is www.resonanceexperience.com. Resonance like resonance, and experience like experience in one word. But if you're a yoga teacher and you want to look more deeply at some of the questions that we touch upon in those calls, then you can also look up the Fair Yoga Institute, which is www.fyi.care. And we're actually starting end of April a series of online support groups that will touch upon various topics, such as sustainability, such as self-care, or such as the relational dynamics that we enter into as yoga teachers.
Okay, great. And if you'd like to follow up with me and to practice being as kind to yourself as you are to others, you can find me at yourownbestfriend.co.uk. So thanks very much for listening. Thanks very much, Valerie, for chatting.
Thank you very much to you, Andrew, as per usual. And everybody, take good care. And please let us know what you think of these chats. Let us know if there's anything that you want us to touch upon. We'd be very happy to do so.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.